happy rhubarb season and happy spring, my friends! To celebrate all this pink beauty, we are making a rhubarb tart with streusel topping. Put 212 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour into the bowl of a food processor. Add 2 teaspoons of Diamond Crystal Kosher salt or 1 teaspoon of table salt and 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar and mix for 15 seconds. Then add 284 grams of unsalted butter, sliced 1/4 inch thick and chilled. That's 2½ sticks. Give it about 15 1-second pulses. The pulses should feel pretty long, like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Unlike all the other pie dough recipes you've ever seen, the only mistake you can make here is to not process the butter enough. Most pie recipes ask you to stop when the butter is the size of peas. Not this one. Go all the way to a finely grated parmesan stage. Now measure out 142 grams of flour in a bowl and add the processed flour butter mixture to it. This extra flour will create layers. Toss these two mixtures thoroughly. There is no worry about overmixing at this point. Until you add the liquid ingredients, the gluten doesn't start to develop. I mix for 45 to 60 seconds. Now add 57 grams of very cold water mixed with 57 grams of very cold vodka. Cheap, unflavored kind, don't get creative on me here. And mix using cutting motions with a large spoon. When the liquid is absorbed, squeeze the dough with your hands until it comes together into a lump. Try to use more punching and pressing motions rather than folding motions to reduce how much gluten you develop. Form it into a log and cut in half. Move half of the dough out of the bowl and form the dough remaining in the bowl into a disc. I like to kind of wipe the bowl out with my dough. Don't worry about little cracks, that's normal. Place the dough onto a piece of plastic and wrap extremely tightly. Then press down on it. This will eliminate some cracks. Don't worry about little cracks on the side. We'll take care of them when rolling. Now repeat the shaping and wrapping procedure with the second piece of dough. Place both discs into the fridge overnight and up to 5 days, or freeze for future use. Place the dough on a well-floured surface. Sprinkle it with flour and bang it from one side to another. Rotate 90 degrees and bang again. Keep rotating and banging, being careful to keep the thickness of the dough even. This makes the butter pliable and rollable even though it's completely cold. Letting pie dough warm up before rolling can result in a very sticky dough, so I prefer to work with it straight from the fridge. If you end up with cracks on the edges, squeeze them with your hands, folding those edges under the circle of dough, but make sure to maintain the round shape. Little cracks become big cracks after rolling, so you want to fix this problem as early as possible. When you have a disc that is about 1/2 inch thick, you can start rolling. After every single roll, rotate the dough. This accomplishes 2 things. It keeps the dough even, and it warns you of sticking before the situation is hopeless. Keep rolling and rotating, and don't be afraid of adding flour. This flour is on the outside of the dough. It won't make it tough. If you encounter sticking, unstick your dough with a pastry scraper, move it to the side, and reflour your counter. By the way, I got myself a new rolling pin. It's a tapered French-style pin that all the serious bakers seem to like. It took me a little while to get used to it, but now I see what the fuss is about. It helps you control the shape of the dough better. Maybe I should make a video about different rolling pins sometimes and how to use them. Let me know in the comments if this video would be useful to you. When your dough is about 1/8 of an inch thick, check if it's big enough for your tart pan. My tart pan is 11 inches in diameter. It's always safer to make the dough too big than too small. What I'm looking for is close to 1 inch overhang. Fold the dough in half, brush off extra flour if you see any, and fold it in half again, and brush again on both sides. Mine isn't very floury today, so I don't have anything to brush off. Now place it into the pan and unfold, shifting it as necessary to center it. don't stretch the dough to fit it into the corners. Whatever you stretch now will shrink back in the oven. What you want to do is lift and mold the dough into the corners and press it very firmly into the sides of the pan. Trim the dough with kitchen shears, leaving a 1-inch overhang. Then go through the edge one more time, pressing firmly. To prevent the dough from forming big bubbles during baking, we need to prick it with a fork on the bottom and on the sides. You want to compress the dough but not poke it all the way through. Making deep holes could cause leaking. You could blind bake the shell with weights, or you could freeze it for an hour. I prefer freezing because it's easier and the dough doesn't overbake by the time the fruit is cooked. But the success of this method completely depends on your oven, which makes it a little risky. It works great in my little Breville on a round black pan that came with it, but to make it work in my regular oven, I need to use a stone and a higher temperature. Even with all that, the very center of the tart was not quite as brown as I would have liked, but that's just me being picky. If you find that this method is too risky, look in the description below the video for instructions on how to par-bake the crust. Place a pizza steel or stone in the bottom third of the oven and preheat it to 450 for at least 45 minutes before baking. In a medium bowl, combine 80 grams of light brown sugar, 80 grams of flour, 80 grams of butter, 40 grams of sliced almonds, and a pinch of salt. Rub the butter into the flour and sugar until it's the size of small peas. By the end, it's good to have this mixture starting to clump up a bit. Mine didn't because my brown sugar was hard as a rock. Since I didn't have time to run out to the store for the new sugar, I covered it with a damp paper towel and microwaved it in 20-second intervals until it softened, but it didn't behave quite right. In this particular recipe, that's not a big deal. The streusel is very forgiving, but learn from my mistake and check the state of your brown sugar before baking. Put your streusel in the fridge until ready to use. Wash your rhubarb and dry it well. Then trim the ends. If the stalks are very wide, cut them in half lengthwise and then dice 1/2 inch thick. I like a very full tart, so for 11-inch shell, I am using 850 grams of rhubarb. If you're new to baking and worry about the tart overflowing, reduce this to 750 grams. Weigh the rhubarb to figure out your yield. We'll use this weight to calculate our sugar and tapioca starch. Multiply the rhubarb weight by 0.2. That's the sugar weight. It's 20% of rhubarb. Multiply the rhubarb weight by 0.02, and that's the tapioca starch weight. It's 2% of rhubarb. Add a teaspoon of cinnamon and mix well. When your crust is frozen or pre-baked and the oven is preheated, add the sugar mixture to the rhubarb and mix well. Pour it into the crust and distribute the sugar remaining in the bottom of the bowl evenly over the rhubarb. Squeeze the streusel topping into walnut-sized lumps and add on top of rhubarb. Mine didn't want to clump up today because of my dry sugar, so I'm just sprinkling it on top. Place a piece of parchment on your pizza steel or stone. Place the tart directly on the parchment. I should have pulled the rack out instead of burning myself. Oh well, next time. Reduce the oven to 425 and bake for 10 minutes. Reduce it to 400 and bake for another 10 minutes. Reduce it to 375 and bake for another 20 to 30 minutes or until the juices are bubbling and the streusel is brown. Slide a spatula under the parchment to lift the tart slightly and slide a rimless baking sheet underneath to pull the tart out of the oven. Cool until warm, then roll a pin around the edges to remove excess dough. Lift the tart and place it on inverted bowl to help you remove the outer ring. Oops, I missed a little bit of dough here and it's slightly stuck. There we go. Slide the tart onto a cutting board or a serving plate and serve. In spite of all my little mishaps with the sugar, this turned out beautifully. Here are more very detailed culinary tutorials for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.